It's already happened. For the first time in modern American history, a sitting president has been openly blocked by his own party. Emergency powers challenged, war authority frozen, lines crossed that were once unthinkable. 10 minutes ago, this was impossible. Now, it's a precedent. How did power slip far enough that the system had to turn on itself to stop it? Stay with us, because what happens next rewrites the rules forever. The allegation is now explicit. A growing number of Republican lawmakers are privately and, in some cases, openly accusing President Donald Trump of abusing emergency powers and pushing presidential war authority beyond constitutional limits. This is no longer speculation. It is no longer a rumor. It is an internal charge forming at the highest levels of Congress. In Washington, over the past several days, internal congressional communications have increased sharply. Lawmakers confirm that these exchanges are taking place away from cameras and without public statements. The reason is clear and highly unusual. The concern is not about Democrats, elections, or messaging. The concern is about the president himself. The focus of these discussions is narrow and severe. Trump's repeated treatment of war powers and national emergencies as personal tools rather than conditional authorities granted by Congress has triggered what many lawmakers now describe as a constitutional breaking point. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a challenge to the structure of American governance. I have covered political crises for decades. I have reported during wars, impeachments, and moments when presidential authority was questioned. Still, I must be direct. I have never seen members of a president's own party move this quickly toward institutional resistance without first trying public denial. That alone tells you how serious this moment is. What makes this crisis more dangerous is Trump's reaction. Instead of addressing the substance of the accusations, he has dismissed them entirely. He has mocked the concerns. He has treated warnings about constitutional limits as petty, exaggerated, and not worth his attention. In effect, the president has signaled that these accusations are too small to matter. That posture is not neutral. It is combustible. History shows that when a president openly belittles constitutional constraints, escalation follows. Congress understands this. That is why the conversations now underway are not emotional. They are procedural. They are legal. They are focused on containment. No official action has yet been announced. But the pressure inside Congress is unmistakable and accelerating. Lawmakers are no longer asking whether the system is being tested. They are asking how close it is to catastrophic constitutional failure. We have entered territory that is unfamiliar, unstable, and dangerous. This is not politics as usual. This is the early stage of a constitutional crisis, one unfolding quietly, but with consequences that could be permanent. At the center of this unfolding constitutional crisis stands Donald Trump. There is no ambiguity about that. The accusations directed at him are now specific, documented, and escalating. That he has expanded presidential war powers beyond their constitutional intent, and that he has normalized the use of emergency authority as a standing method of governance, not as an extraordinary last resort. These are not theoretical concerns. They are rooted in repeated statements, formal declarations, and a consistent pattern of behavior. Trump has spoken about military force in ways that strip it of restraint. He has framed emergencies as permanent conditions. And when confronted with constitutional warnings, he has responded not with explanation, but with dismissal. I have reported on executive power for decades. I have seen presidents push boundaries. I have seen Congress hesitate. But I have never seen a president treat allegations of constitutional abuse with this level of open mockery and contempt. Trump has ridiculed the accusations. He has brushed them aside as insignificant. He has spoken as if the limits placed on his authority are inconveniences, not laws. That attitude is not cosmetic. It is central to why this crisis is accelerating. Opposing him is not the full Republican Party, but a critical segment within it. These are lawmakers with institutional memory, figures who understand that constitutional damage does not announce itself immediately. It accumulates. It hardens into precedent. Their concern is not ideological disagreement. It is the fear that legislative authority is being hollowed out in real time. They are reacting to evidence, not rhetoric. If war powers and emergency declarations are treated as personal instruments of will, Congress becomes secondary. Oversight becomes symbolic. And history is very clear about what follows when elected legislatures surrender control of force and crisis to one individual. The Democratic Party plays a supporting role at this moment. Democrats provide votes and public scrutiny, but they are not the origin of the confrontation. That distinction is critical. This crisis did not begin as partisan opposition. It began as an internal alarm. Finally, there are the oversight mechanisms: inspectors general, compliance reviews, congressional committees, statutory timelines. These tools are slow, they are procedural, they do not shout, but they are relentless. And right now, they represent the most serious threat to unchecked executive power. Trump's visible disdain for these processes is telling. He treats them as nuisances, as delays, as something beneath him. What is happening now is not a clash of personalities. It is a direct collision between executive ambition and constitutional restraint. And even for someone who has witnessed multiple national crises, I have rarely seen the warning signs this clear, this concentrated, and this openly disregarded. This is not politics as usual. This is a constitutional emergency unfolding in real time. The central dispute now confronting Washington is stark and dangerous. It concerns whether a president may treat the power to use military force as a discretionary instrument deployed by instinct, framed by rhetoric, and insulated from immediate congressional restraint. In recent weeks, Donald Trump has publicly and indirectly signaled a willingness to consider military leverage in scenarios that extend beyond traditional adversaries. That shift is the point of ignition. What alarms lawmakers is not a single sentence or offhand remark. It is the accumulation statements layered upon prior declarations. A pattern in which force is discussed casually, boundaries are minimized, and constitutional checks are treated as negotiable. The most destabilizing element is that the implied targets are not confined to hostile states. They include territories connected to allies. That is unprecedented in modern U.S. governance. The case that crystallized these concerns is Greenland. Greenland is not an abstract location. It is an autonomous territory of Denmark, a treaty ally. Denmark's membership in NATO binds the United States to collective defense obligations. Any military coercion, explicit or implied, would not be symbolic. It would be legally consequential, strategically explosive. It would place the United States in direct confrontation with Europe under the very framework designed to prevent such outcomes. I have covered alliance crises before. Even so, I must be candid. I have never seen senior lawmakers forced to publicly explain to the American people why the United States cannot threaten allied territory without triggering treaty obligations. That fact alone marks a departure into uncharted constitutional territory. Congress's response followed swiftly. Lawmakers across party lines concluded that these remarks could no longer be treated as metaphor or provocation. They moved to reassert the legislature's authority through the War Powers Act, not as a theoretical safeguard, but as an active constraint. The objective is precise: to prevent unilateral military action absent congressional authorization, to draw a line before precedent hardens. The president's reaction intensified the crisis. Rather than address the substance, Trump has publicly belittled the concerns. He has portrayed the warnings as exaggerated. He has spoken as though the legal implications are trivial, almost laughable. The message is unmistakable. These accusations are small, technical, and beneath him. That posture matters. Because when a president treats constitutional limits with sarcasm, the risk is not rhetorical, it is operational. This is not a partisan maneuver. It is an institutional intervention. Congress is not attempting to win an argument. It is attempting to preserve a structure. If the use of force against allied interests becomes a personal option, the balance of powers collapses. Quietly at first, then permanently. I say this with the weight of long observation. It is difficult even for me to grasp how rapidly this threshold was approached. Once crossed, it does not easily reset. The legislative branch understands this. That is why the response has been procedural, deliberate, and urgent. We are now at a constitutional flashpoint. The question is no longer what was said. It is whether the system can still enforce its limits before precedent turns into permission. The national emergency declaration tied to oil resources in Venezuela is no longer a theoretical constitutional problem. It has crossed into something far more serious. It carries direct, measurable consequences for ordinary Americans. That is what makes this moment so dangerous. The Donald Trump administration has justified the declaration as a matter of national security. But once an issue is labeled an emergency, executive power expands instantly. Oversight is compressed. Normal safeguards are suspended. And the costs of that shift do not fall on institutions first, they fall on people. Emergency authority allows the White House to move money, redirect resources, and override standard review processes. That means fewer hearings, fewer explanations, fewer chances for the public to understand what is being done in their name. When transparency disappears, citizens lose the ability to judge whether decisions are protecting them or exploiting them. Lawmakers began asking a question that every voter understands. How does this emergency help families pay their bills? The administration has not answered. Venezuelan oil does not produce immediate relief at the gas pump. Infrastructure takes years. Market effects are uncertain. Meanwhile, emergency declarations can raise prices, distort markets, and concentrate benefits in the hands of large energy corporations. The people who bear the risk are not executives. They are retirees, workers, families living on fixed incomes. I have covered economic crises before. Still, I must say this clearly, I have rarely seen an emergency invoked where the burden on the public was so obvious and the explanation so thin. When energy prices fluctuate under emergency rules, households feel it first. When oversight is weakened, consumers lose protection. When timelines are bypassed, mistakes multiply and the public pays for them. The administration's response to these concerns has been openly dismissive. Trump has treated questions about transparency and public impact as tedious distractions. He has mocked document requests. He has brushed off deadlines as technicalities. In effect, the message has been, this is too small to matter. For people struggling with rising costs and economic uncertainty, that message is not abstract. It is insulting. Congress has taken notice. The focus has shifted from intent to impact. Which deadlines were missed? Which disclosures were delayed? Who approved the bypassing of normal review? And most critically, who is protecting the public interest while emergency power is being exercised at speed? Inspectors general and oversight committees now sit at the center of this confrontation because they represent the last line of defense for citizens who cannot see inside the process. Oversight is slow, but it exists for a reason. It prevents ordinary people from becoming collateral damage in political maneuvers. Emergency power attempts to outrun that protection by flooding the system with urgency. That strategy may dominate headlines, but it leaves families exposed. Even for someone who has witnessed multiple national emergencies, it is difficult to ignore how directly this one threatens public trust and public stability. This is not just about Venezuela. It is about whether emergency authority has become a shortcut that sacrifices accountability and shifts risk downward onto people who never consented to it. If this precedent holds, emergencies will no longer be exceptions. They will become routine tools of governance. And when that happens, the cost is not paid by presidents or corporations. It is paid by the public, quietly and permanently. This is why Congress is pressing for transparency now, not later. Because once emergency power becomes normal, the damage to democratic protection is already done. Regardless of how the immediate votes conclude, several facts are now fixed, and they are historically consequential. This is one of the rare moments in modern U.S. politics when members of the Republican Party have publicly and deliberately moved to limit the power of a president from their own party. That action alone signals a systemic alarm. War powers are no longer treated as a gray zone. Emergency authority is no longer presumed benign. Both are now subject to explicit institutional skepticism. I have watched Congress defer to presidents many times. I have watched warnings ignored. I have not often seen lawmakers decide, collectively and openly, that the risk of inaction is greater than the risk of confrontation. That is the shift that defines this moment. For Donald Trump, the response has been revealing. Rather than adapt to scrutiny, he has intensified confrontation. The language has hardened. Emergencies are framed as constant. Loyalty is demanded, not earned. Criticism is mocked. The accusations are treated as small, technical irritants, unworthy of attention. This posture is not incidental. It underscores a growing reliance on executive authority as the primary engine of control. The pattern is unmistakable. As oversight increases, the rhetoric escalates. As guardrails reappear, the appeals to urgency multiply. That is not the behavior of a presidency confident in institutional balance. It is the behavior of one increasingly dependent on unilateral power to sustain momentum. The institutional verdict, however, does not turn on Trump's political fortunes. It turns on a deeper question, one that history will not soften. Is personal authority bound by law, or is law bent to accommodate personal authority? Democracies fail not when leaders argue loudly, but when rules are quietly normalized out of existence. This confrontation is therefore not about a single term, a single vote, or a single president. It is about precedent. The rules set now will be inherited by every future president, regardless of party. If emergency power becomes routine, it will be used routinely. If war authority is personalized, it will remain personalized, and the cost will not be paid by institutions. It will be paid by the public, slowly and permanently. I do not say this lightly. It is difficult even for me to recall a moment when the system stood so close to a decisive fork in the road. One path restores balance through restraint and oversight. The other hardens exception into norm. This is the test, not of ideology, not of loyalty, but of whether the American system still possesses the will to enforce its own limits when doing so is politically dangerous. The answer will not be found in speeches or headlines. It will be found in whether Congress holds the line now while it still can. Thank you for staying with me until these final moments. It truly means a great deal. If this story touched you or sparked reflection, please leave a like, hit subscribe, and share so our voices can reach further. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and I will see you in the next journey. Farewell.